Senior Chief Petty Officer Phil Anderton is honest, raw, and real, especially about life as a drill instructor in the Navy. We talked about mistakes, we talked about triumph. Phil covers the good, the bad, and the ugly associated with taking recruits from civilian to sailor, and the fact that, as he points out, the enemy doesn't care about your gender. This is the Carry the Load podcast. So Phil, you spent 20 years in like a month in the United States Navy. You did all kinds of things. You were you were a drill instructor, you were a CB, you were on convoy operations specifically. If you could boil down your entire time into a sentence, a phrase, a word, how would you boil that experience?
Wow. Yeah, that's Todd, thank you for that question that I wasn't anticipating that.
I'm not going to throw you a softball
start,
off
yeah.
the bat.
I would say, God, this is going to sound, I would say the role, the behind the scenes role that a lot of the military fills requires just as much hard work, training, and effort. I hate to say this, but like logistics win wars, the supply people would love to hear that. But I would say very proudly the supporting role a lot of the staff and other units, other MOSs, other job titles that we fill, to execute the bigger mission. So I was very proud of a lot of the behind the scenes that we got to execute, because obviously nothing, as expeditionary construction, right? Nothing we did is making the news, but I know what a role it plays, what a big role it plays. So,
yeah, I think that's an interesting aspect. A lot of people think military. They see a war movie. They're always thinking, infantry. They're always thinking, combat. And the reality is that the number of people in combat
minimal
versus the number of people in support of those people is so lopsided in the favor of the support. And so, and getting to know you in a short period of time, you're a lead from the front guy. You're like you're what we refer to as an alpha.
Yeah.
And so you being in a support role almost seems a little bit askew. How did you reconcile that with your personality and your nature?
The obvious answer is humility. You got to humble yourself. I was 18, I was 19. I tried to go that route, didn't work out, wasn't ready. Became a CB, what is essentially a construction engineer, a contractor, a construction worker, if you will. We do a lot of the trades when we deploy. I'd have to say you humble yourself, and then you take pride in your mission. You still have a mission. You still we have history, and all the support rates, all the staff and support, they have history. And if you look back, though the warfighter is absolutely deserving of the movies and the accolades and the praise that they get for above and beyond, if you will, but a lot of other people are there to support, and their mission doesn't happen without. So I think humility first, especially that young 18, 19, 20-year-old. And then I went to Iraq when I was 19, 20. So I certainly got a taste of it, so I can understand. But then as I promoted and I understood the bigger picture, as you said, it's very lopsided, and they don't get where they go, and they can't do what they do without a lot of people. And most of them know that. I've served with some fantastic guys that go downrange, and they know that. They appreciate the support, so it's a good team effort.
So, all this stuff you're talking about here, if you're to put this into some kind of lesson, I know how you are with your kids. How do you tell them everything you just kind of summarized with me? How do you put that in a lesson for your kids or for anybody else that you work with?
I think at my core, I always go back to hard work pays off. I have to go back to hard work pays off, because through the advancement cycle, you're advanced by how hard you work, being documented, right? An annual review of that, where you're given a certain grade, if you will, and then you take tests So it's performance-based, it's knowledge-based, and I wasn't the nicest guy. I wasn't.
Are you referring to the drill instructor piece?
Well, in
Or
the
you just-
Navy in
in the Navy in
general,
okay.
hard work pays off. I mean, my whole career, and you'll have your people that are prior vets everybody's going to have something negative to say about how the military advances. Somebody always had a bad experience, but in my experience, generally speaking, the hardest workers advanced. The hardest workers were rewarded. The hardest workers were given better opportunities. It's just what it is.
That's interesting, and you've got a slightly different perspective than I do, because that was one of the reasons I got out. And I don't disagree with you in hindsight, but at the time, what I was, and maybe I used a justification to get out, because I was watching people advance. It was a matter of, if you don't screw up, you're going to move to the next level, certainly at the officer ranks.
For context, yeah, officer, enlisted.
Yes.
I would tend to agree with you more on the officer side, even with my 20 years. I would tend to agree with you. Officers were treated different. Officers were very much, you got to kind of check the right boxes. You got to stroke the right egos. I feel on the officer side, I'd agree with you. But as an enlisted, I was mouthy. I had an attitude. I knife hand. I fought. But people put up with it because I outworked everybody.
Outworked and got the results on the
And
side.
I got the results. Yeah, absolutely. You have to get the results.
So you started off in working in the Seabees. You found yourself in Iraq. What do you remember? You did multiple tours. Was there one that stood out more than another?
I would say the biggest thing from Iraq, we were supposed to go to Rota, Spain, and then we had like a 30-day notice that, hey, Rota, Spain's not happening, boys. You're going to Iraq and you're going to do convoy security. We're construction workers. But we have some history there. We have some history.
As Seabees,
so
we have went there history. As a Seabee, got it.
And a lot of Seabees deployed, and they did different missions. So Iraq, plain and simple, was the bonding, the fraternal brotherhood, males and females. But man, it was probably my best deployment. It was probably the most memorable deployment, where I made the most friends, because when you're in the suck, it's comforting. You build a bond in the suck, if you will. You build a bond in the struggle. When it's nice and it's fun and it's training and the bullets aren't real, people they have their feelings. They get in their feelings. When lives are on the line, and we're all you have. When we leave the wire, we did convoy security for about 7 months. You build a bond, and so I definitely miss that. And I'm sure that's something a lot of veterans would attest to. And a lot of people in the civilian world, when they have a good organizational opportunity, when they have an organization and a team that is tight like that, I'm sure they could agree that those are the better scenarios that you want to be in.
So when you talk about building bonds through adversity and convoy ops, give people a sense for that. When you talked about leaving the lines and you're going on a convoy, how far would it be from your line to where you're going? What was an average trip?
So an average trip across the different FOBs, I mean, sometimes days, we wouldn't come back to our FOB for days. So typically, and for reference, we escorted trucks, right? That was our main thing. We were escorting local nationals, right? The drivers of the bigger trucks that would take construction materials, dirt, sometimes God knows what. We would escort people from a base to a base, a FOB to a FOB.
How many vehicles?
The biggest you'd get would be like 36. You'd have your 6-gun trucks, and you'd have...
It's a big target.
You'd have 5 to 6 trucks in between each, so maybe 36. And there were certainly some times where we had to execute to get off the X, to get out of there, right? We had some things happen. Everybody made it home safe from that deployment, not without some bumps and bruises, but...
Is it hard to drive down the road now and not put yourself in that place, because you're in such a defensive posture?
I would say that's initially, because we were stationed in Southern California. Yeah, there was probably some of that initially. There were some times where you'd get stranded and you'd have to do a day op, and not that we weren't built for that. I mean, we executed it, but it wasn't ideal. Most people moved at night. You didn't want to be on their roads when I don't mean any disrespect, when the donkeys are on the road. When we'd have kids on donkeys riding next to us. So when your biggest threat's IEDs, and you get stuck at night for somebody got hit, somebody in front of you, something happened. It certainly puts you a little on edge when you're in the middle of their daily like they're trying to live their life too, and they're moving about during the day. So day ops were definitely a different animal, but I think I've outgrown most of that. I think everybody in Dallas hates traffic. I think everybody in Dallas drives defensively and hates, it's like 90 miles an hour isn't fast enough here. So I'd say no, not anymore.
So is that, when you were over there as a CB, what kind of stuff were y'all building? Because convoy security is not the normal job.
No, it is, of the CBs, it is not.
So it's you build it, after it's erected, then you turn to the next best use of your talents, or?
So in general, CBs would deploy with Army, with Marines, with Special Forces, and we would build out their FOBs, right? They get there, they put up tents, they put up hasty cops, they put up, barbed wire, and they start running ops and with tents. We come and build plywood SWA huts, right? We come and put air conditioners on the
What's a plywood SWA hut?
Southwest Asia. So a plywood building, a 16 by 16, 16 by 32, maybe a Connex box they're sleeping out of. We'll add air conditioning. We'll add electrical. We'll put a set of stairs. We're there to make the warfighter more comfortable. Maybe some people would disagree with me, but that's what we would do over there. Expeditionary, right? Our role was to make the warfighter more comfortable so they could be more effective. They just happened in 2005 to 2006 in Ramadi. They must have needed a lot more. Maybe the Army and the Marines were doing other things. So they brought us in probably to supplement a lot of that. So my team and other teams like me did convoy ops, where we escorted from base to base. But a lot of CBs in general would deploy, and they would build to improve the quality of life for the people on those camps.
So were you ever on a ship?
I was never on a ship. So that is one nice part about being a CB, is we only see ships if we want to visit them as a fan or a civilian on a pier or something. But
so for somebody wanting to join the Navy, who doesn't like ships,
asked to be a CB.
Okay. Well, then how did you get selected to be a drill instructor?
So having completed enough sea time, you're up for shore duty. I did an instructor billet, shore duty for the CBs. Having done another sea tour, my next shore duty was available, and you can ask for it. Or at the time, I'll be honest, I didn't want to do it. I wanted to go back to sea. There was nothing available. And so drill instructors are available for any rate in the Navy. Any seagoing, sub, air, warfare, anybody can apply to be a drill instructor. There's about, 800-900 billets at Great Lakes, which is in Illinois, where our boot camp is.
So about 800 or 900 positions to be filled as a drill instructor.
As a drill instructor, or some of the support instructor staff, the firefighting, the gun range. So there might be close to 1,000 billets in Great Lakes.
Why did you not want to do it?
Well, okay, because as a CB, I'm just very hard-headed. Where my pipeline is, we're a very small community. There's only, I'm going to get this number wrong, maybe there's 5,000 CBs. Very tight-knit, and then half are in Gulfport, Mississippi. The other half are in Ventura, California, Port Hueneme, California. So in my mind at the time, I didn't want to leave my community. I was very kind of, I don't want to say brainwashed, but I was very proud of being a CB. I'd done the Iraq deployment. I wanted to do more. So I just believed that I needed to stay in my community. Obviously, the best thing that ever happens to us sometimes isn't what we want, but what we make of it. And I was kind of told by the detailer, hey, it's this or go overseas. So I chose to go to I screened and ended up going to be a drill instructor.
So is that you were going to have to do what we would refer to as a B billet or a secondary duty? You were going to have to do something.
Yes. They wouldn't let me do what I wanted. My first choice, which was to go back to battalion, which is our seagoing, deployable, like that's where you make your money as a CB. That's our ship, that's our bread and butter. That was not available for me when the window was open. I tried all kinds of things to make it happen. It just didn't happen. And God had other plans for me. And
So what I know about the drill instructor community is obviously from the Marine Corps perspective. Having been under the thumb of a few of them in my years, but I knew that from a career advancement standpoint, and not too advanced, but it's in order to become more professionally rounded, you have to do certain things like this. And so drill instructor duty, like recruiting duty, was an incredibly powerful stepping stone, but it could also derail you in a heartbeat, because it's very, very unforgiving from the standpoint of, if you do something wrong with a recruit, from the standpoint of losing your cool or stepping out of line in any way, it could end your career. Is it like that in the Navy as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is. It really is. The top 10% are going to massively benefit in their career from the leadership, the experience, and certainly the eval saying, you know, recruit training command when you do really well. A lot of RDCs do good, and it doesn't catapult their career. And then you're absolutely right. I definitely was witness to some open captain's mast for some inappropriate and craziness that does end people's career, and even there was potentially some criminal stuff here and there. I mean, it's a large command. It's a large, high-stress environment. It's certainly a make-or-break moment in your career.
And so, and by the way, an opens captain mast, that's kind of like being called into the boss's office.
That's the CEO calling you in and inviting everybody to watch your ass chewing.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you get prepared to become a drill instructor?
So there is a pretty good, right, onboarding process. There's a pretty good training pipeline for RDCs. So RDCs that had already, drill instructors who had already proven, 4, 5, 6 pushes, they get selected to be the drill instructor, the trainer.
Okay.
So it's a great pipeline. You come in and they beat the brakes off you, right? PT. They use PT to break you down, and there's
the Navy.
I know it sounds crazy, but I'm saying the Navy breaks you down. But anybody who's ever worn a red rope knows, at least in 2011, they beat the brakes off you. They run however fast you think you can run, somebody on their staff can run faster and will break you. So they do, but they build you back up. They teach you. You're going to be around recruits. You're going to be around these young, impressionable minds, and they want to make sure you're ready. So there's definitely a good training pipeline for the C School program.
So you went through boot camp, obviously, in order to join. Mm-hmm. How was it going back through boot camp this time as a drill instructor? You knew the game. You knew that you were being prepared to be on the other side of it, but they're still going to mess with you because they have to. I mean, they're showing you how to do it now. But there's a pridefulness that has to get in the way a little bit.
Always speaking for myself and my experience, it's definitely an us against them. You're in a class with other future RDCs that you're going to push with. You're going to see on the drill deck. You're going to see through your time there. These are your people, right? So you definitely develop like an us against them mentality, and the instructors know it and they're okay with it, because sometimes that's what it takes. Like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, So it takes a bonding of that class and the other classes kind of around you, and the blue ropes are the drill instructors in training. So there's definitely a blue rope mentality of like us against them. Let's support each other. Let's get through this process together, and then we'll be one of them.
So am I making the wrong assumption though, when you went through boot camp, or when you went through the training, was it like going through boot camp again, where you're basically staying with your platoon day in and day out?
No.
Okay, so it was more instructional.
It's more instruction, yeah.
Okay.
I think, yeah, it's more instruction. It's more, there's about a 6-week classroom portion where it's like I said, the PT is rather annoying. I'm just not a runner, and they use running a lot. So, and then there's a lot of course of instruction. You're going through leadership, you're going through ethics, you're going through how to fold and stow a rack. Everything you're going to teach and expect of your student, your recruit, you have to show, right? So I'm getting graded by them on my ability to follow all the instructions that I'm then going to ask the recruit, being the new student, right? The civilian to sailor. Everything I'm going to ask of them, I have to show proficiency in before I'm allowed to proceed. So there is a level of it, but it's in a classroom setting.
So it's not the same. It's not like you went through boot camp a second time.
No. That would have been a different animal, I'm sure.
Yeah, and that's, I know some services do kind of view it like that. So you guys do not, but then does that prepare you properly to set that, certain expectations with the recruits?
I think the only difference would be maybe you don't gain the empathy of what they're going through, but it certainly prepares you. You do a 6-week class portion, and then you do about I think it's like a 6-7 week shadow phase, and that's where you're no longer in a classroom. You're still mustering for PT. You're still doing inspections, but that's where you go shadow a division, and you go spend the time with the division. You learn from the other RDCs. The other drill instructors. So it's a shadow phase. It might be like a OJT, right? On the job training. You might, like if you're a new hire, you get put with the senior hire. Kind of the same concept.
You bring up an interesting word and phrase there. It doesn't give you the same level of empathy. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I say you should have the empathy already because you've been a sailor, you've been to the fleet, you know what some of us appreciated that they signed up, and some of us treated them, I don't want to say some people, right, a small minority, there is a power trip that comes with that level of control of a situation, that level of control of an environment. There is an authoritarian mindset that some people develop. I would say most RDs, it's just like any job. Most people go in with the right intentions. Most people can have the empathy. I had the empathy that though I was not perfect, and though I would apologize to many of my recruits from my past life, because I did push very hard, I would say sorry if I got the chance. There was an end state in mind, right? There's a little Machiavellian too, even in somebody like me who cared. But I did try. There were moments where they get a letter. There were moments where they do a phone call and they break. Somebody got diagnosed with cancer. Somebody died in I had a troop. I could have been a smart ass and been like, oh, your boyfriend broke up with you, and just on the floor crying. And I'm, what the hell? Brother was killed the night before, wrapped around a tree. She found out on the first phone call home, second phone call home, whatever it was. So real life would hit you, and you'd be reminded, this is somebody's child, this is somebody's daughter, somebody's son, somebody's potential husband, wife. So if you remind yourself that, even though we're in a student training environment, even though they're recruits and we're in charge, they're human. There's a human element there, and that's where empathy should come from.
So, you were talking about the power trips that some people gain, and I want to come back here in just a minute to the male-female aspect of basic training, because that was something I did not experience. But the power trip aspect, did you guys get to study, or were you asked to study, presented with that whole Stanford project? You know what I'm talking about?
Is that specifically the one where they would buzz pain and it was fake, but they had to keep pressing the number?
I think that may have been a part of it, but it basically was saying randomly, this group is going to be in a prisoner role.
Yeah.
This group is going to be
guards.
in the guard role.
Yeah.
And they saw people taking on these personas, the power trip aspect that you were talking about, and it got out of control to the point where they had to end the
experiment.
Did you experience any power trips like that?
Oh, absolutely.
And how do you put that in check as someone? I mean, I would assume that wasn't you.
I made some mistakes.
Okay.
I definitely made some mistakes. I would say, and I'm a very competitive person now, but I would say competition in the high stress environment, like I said, there were some people I'd say sorry to. There were times where you'd go Machiavelli,
But were you pushing them to be better?
In my mind, yes, but that doesn't make it right. I mean, I will give you a story, right? And this is embarrassing as hell, but slashing zeros is like the biggest deal in boot camp. You got to teach these kids to slash a zero, because handwriting is judged. Their handwriting is judged. You have to get people with good handwriting to write in the deck log, write the watch bill. I attempted to make another man eat a piece of paper because he multiple times did not slash a zero. The thought crossed my mind, the paper went to his mouth, and we stopped short there. But just the fact that I did that, I still look back on that moment, and I would say sorry to him if I ever could. I mean, when you're in the heat of the moment, so to answer the question, to get around that, in those high stakes environment, that's why there's 3 RDCs. The 3 drill instructors, I think the openness protects most people, the good and the bad. The problem is it's such a high stakes environment. There's so much sleep deprivity because we're driving 30 minutes home, trying to have a life, trying to eat dinner, trying to talk to our family. 30 minutes back, got to get there early to get them in. I mean, there's times I'm sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night, and I'm drinking. You know, at the time, you ever seen the monsters? They're called the BFCs, the big fucking cans.
Yeah.
I used to pop a BFC. Mind you, this was my morning, 5. I get there 5:30 if they have a 6 o'clock wake up. I pop a BFC, I take a swig, I take a 5-hour energy, I dump it into BFC, and that's breakfast. I mean,
That's not healthy.
A lot of, and I don't know, the Marine Corps is probably similar. I mean, there is some sleep deprived. So my issue there is because the sleep deprived is a thing, because people are so competitive and push so hard, there are times where you're alone with 88 recruits, and that's usually, normally it's not mob mentality. Normally somebody in the room is like, okay, I'm gonna be the good guy, and you're gonna be the bad guy. You gotta have a good guy. You gotta have a good guy. But when you're alone and you're trying to fill both roles, and there was a time where Manning was short, and I was the only RDC for my division.
And for how many? How many recruits did you have?
I had at that division, I probably had 75, 80 recruits.
So you were one person.
Well, there was 2 of us.
Okay.
I had 4 divisions under me. I had a what was called a hop. So she was on her second. It was 2 of us. But if she needed to be somewhere else at medical, if she was usually my runner. She was usually the one, because you got to learn your ropes. So she would be the one going to run errands or take recruits somewhere, or babysit recruits somewhere. And I was generally by myself with the division. And I found that is the more high stress, and that's also the times where I probably made more of my mistakes. Whereas when I gained maturity, gained experience, realized there was a time and a place for competition, and then there's a time where I took, early on, the whole thing trying to make kids puke, that was a thing at a time. I'm sure, and I'd hope they'd outgrown that, but that was a thing, and this was 2011, 2012. I mean, you're in your mind, you're pushing for the right reasons, but
It sounds like you'd do it differently.
oh, yeah, I do a lot of things differently. I did get a chance on the back end. They call it the back end. I pushed 6 divisions. You have a whole job where you feel like a training or support role, which is good. You need to decompress. You need to get a different side of that command. And then when you go back, I was so much better on that second half when I had that experience. That Manning shortage was hard, though. There was a lot of new and inexperienced and lack of leadership. I mean, in a culture, you need good leaders. You need leaders on the ground around, because you can't just have everybody in the C-suite. You can't just have everybody in the back office. You can't have everybody in the boardroom. Like, you need actual people who understand leadership. I'm not saying I would do everything different. I mean, 98% of how I executed, I'm very proud of, and I have some amazing. I mean, I got emails from sailors that were out promoting their peers. I got sailors that were kicking ass and thankful for how hard we pushed them.
I think that's really important for anyone listening who's thinking, I don't want my child to go through that, because what he just described, that's hazing. And yes,
some pieces of it.
I
yes.
understand that there are moments of humanity where we go, I wish I wouldn't have said that. I wish I wouldn't have done that.
100%.
But I'm glad you used the 98%, because 98% of the time, all the right things are happening for the right reasons, and it's building the right person. And I think it's also, if we're going to be that critical of something like what we were just discussing, what that means is, as a parent, you've done things right 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And that's not a fair judgment either, because even though you guys have been trained, you're human beings, and there's a 2%, element.
There's a plus or minus deviation factor, I think.
Much better way to say it.
And again, as you said, it's no different than what law enforcement deal with when the video shows a fourth of the angle and 4 minutes of a 30-minute encounter. What I will say is every recruit that graduated with above and beyond ability, because the RDCs who do push, right, we call it the gray, right? There's black and white, and the good ones find the gray. We push hard. They know why we're pushing them hard. Mm-hmm. They know why if you can take this, you can take anything. Because guess what? The fleet, right? We call it the fleet. It's unforgiving because lives are going to be on the line. This is a controlled environment. No matter how mean I get, no matter how many cuss words I say, I'm still under control, and I have somebody that has my back, because we're not all going to just go full crazy, right? There's always going to be somebody that's sitting there like, okay, we're good. We're not going to jail. There's always going to be an RDC, an observer. Not everybody's going to be bad cop, right? Not everybody's going to go flip the racks. But there is an end state to say, hey, when we can train in a controlled environment, we need to push your limits. We need to know what you're capable of, because out there, if you make a mistake, somebody dies. And people do die in the fleet. People do die in the Marine Corps in training. And that's unfortunate, but it's when you can control the environment, you need to up the tempo as much as you can.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. You don't want to say that it's necessary.
You don't want to say that, I agree.
But it's part of the world.
You want to get as close to that line as you can without going over.
So you talked, and I still want to come back to the gender aspect of it, because I think it's such an interesting piece. But walk me through the aspect of being a family man as a drill instructor. I think it's kind of like akin to, and I haven't done either one of these things, but I think it's akin to being a police officer. I mean, you're on, and then all of a sudden you got to come home and totally turn it off. That is a hard thing to do for the human brain.
I can sum it up like this. My wife would routinely have to yell at me to say, they're not your recruits. I had my daughter would have been 11. My son would have been 4 or 5. And then my youngest daughter was born there. Routinely, they're not your recruits. Because recruits will snap too. Recruits will move. For the most part, recruits want to please the drill instructor. Recruits, they know, like, we treated it as a competition. We want to win. There's flags, there's competition, there's praise at the end, being the best division on the drill deck when you graduate. They want to win too, so they're moving fast. They're competing. Most of your guys and gals, they want to win. So the family aspect was hard. I do advise people, and I'm sure the Marines would say the same thing, don't go be a drill instructor if your family's not in order. You either need to be single, and even for the single people out there, there's nobody to do your laundry, there's nobody to buy your groceries, there's nobody to fill your fridge. Because if you're working 16-hour days, 7 days a week for 8 weeks at a time, there's nobody to hold down the home front. And if you do have a home front, you better be good. Your husband or wife better be semi-independent and not need to call you for every bug, every spider, every light bulb that goes out. Like they better be. I'm not saying they got to be perfect. You got to be rock solid. You definitely need a rock solid family to take on that kind of role.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good parallel to life in general. Life in corporate America. If things aren't good at home, they're not going to be good at work. And if things aren't good at work, they're going to be challenged at home. And I'm not saying it's a direct correlation, but it's the importance of balance, and you have to have the family balance.
Well, balance and communication. They need to know what they're signing up for. And I'm sure billable hours in the corporate world's no different. They know what they're signing up for.
So you had men and women going through boot camp at the same time.
Yes.
Did they share the barracks? Was it open squad bays? I mean, because that seems like that's a recipe for disaster.
So the way it worked, and I did push several integrated, we call them integrated, male and female together. So the way it would work is your brother division, right? So 2 departments, they would sleep across from each other in these big, the ships, we call them the big barracks. All the males, so the males from both divisions would sleep in one house, one compartment, and the females would sleep together in the other compartment. So they'd be right across from each other. So the RDCs would go back and forth to lead their divisions.
Okay. And so that seems to me like that would be very difficult. I don't know that I could yell at a woman.
They can yell at themselves.
They can yell at themselves, but did you find yourself going easier just because of the whole traditional man aspect of things? Do you find yourself going easier on the females?
Wow. So let me give you a story, if I may. And when they were running, one of my first divisions was integrated, was females, and they were on the track. I managed to yell out loud in a public setting, "Your tampon will not stop somebody from shooting you."
That's pretty bold.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'd probably do it different, right? But
it's accurate.
it is. The enemy does not care that Western countries choose to have women who serve. Many of our enemies don't. Many of our enemies don't have females who serve, if you really think about that, right? Everyone on our side does, and we're all about equality and everything. Our enemy does not, and they will not show mercy because you're a female. And I drove that home to my females. I drove that home, and I pushed them hard, and I took a lot of pride in them. I do have 2 daughters. I have several sisters. I took a lot of pride in pushing the female side of the house. I'm not going to lie and say that deep down I probably didn't mentor a little more or take a little more liking to them. I'm not going to lie and sit here and say I'm not. I wasn't a little biased, but
In their favor.
In their favor.
Because you, and is that because
deep down I wanted them to win, and I wanted them to not go to the fleet and be unsuccessful or try to rely on. I wanted them to win on their own merit, to win on their own action. I wanted them to step up. I personally, I don't like the military standard. They are given much more time to run, and they're given, and they have a much lower standard for the PT. I don't think that sets them up for success. And I took a lot of pride in my girls out PTing, getting better at PT, because that was one way you could match your male counterpart. I didn't want them to go to the fleet and be dainty. I didn't want them to go to the fleet and be less capable, because the Navy, in my opinion, stupidly, oh, you have more time to run. Like, well, the enemy doesn't think so, right? And you're gonna go to combat because in our country, we send women into combat. So why give them less of a physical standard? Why make them weaker, slower, allow them to be bigger? Why do all that if you're then gonna send them to the same place you send me? And that guy doesn't care. If anything, I mean, of recent events.
you're setting them up for failure?
You're setting them up for failure, absolutely. Now, if you're gonna keep them in the back, okay, let's have the conversation. And that's what they want. But they want to be downrange. They want to be with us. So why then give them a lower standard to train to and execute to, but then ask them to do the same damn thing you're asking me to do? Didn't make a lot of sense to me. So I pushed my girls to push to the male standard. Let's get you to the male standard to pass a PFA. And a lot of
Did
them took
most
to it.
appreciate that?
Most appreciated, yes. I'd say majority of my females appreciated the way that I held them to a higher standard and I helped them get there.
And what kind of pushback did you get from other men?
Zero. Because these are our brothers and sisters. Like, we're going to be serving with them. Why would you disagree with my way? What's in it for you to want me to be nice to them? They're going to be on the ship with you, now on the submarine with you. They're going to be downrange with us. Why wouldn't you want them to be the baddest versions of themselves they could be?
So why have we not, and for the record, I completely agree with you. I'm fine with women in the military. I'm fine with anyone achieving anything based on a meritocracy. But it almost has gotten to the point where, and I've had a couple of guests where we've talked about this, and I believe that the women in the military feel the same way. Don't treat me differently.
Well, and they don't want to serve with a woman who didn't have to earn it.
Exactly.
And let's be real, any woman that's honest, women are more critical of women than men are.
I would say so.
Women, I like to say women eat their own.
So you actually found yourself, in a lot of ways, pushing the women harder. I kind of heard both, so clarify that for me.
When I had the female house, when I was in charge of the female side, absolutely, I pushed them harder. I think all my male recruits would question how hard I pushed them, because I think I was fair. I think I was fair because I like to look at it very simply. I deployed with men and women. Things happened. I learned a lot, right? There was an incident. I learned a lot. And looking...
Well, you can't gloss over that. What do you mean there was an incident?
We had an incident where one of our teammates pulled a gun on myself, and he pulled a gun on somebody else, and court-martialed.
Was this overseas?
Yeah, in Iraq. Yeah, on our Iraq deployment.
Did they snap?
Yeah, he did. He snapped.
What happened?
We were in our first firefight. He didn't engage. Long story short, he didn't engage. He should have. He was in. That was his sector. That was his area we were getting shot at, where he should have helped us shoot back. He didn't. We proceeded to rough him up a little after that. You don't deserve. Again, we're 19, 20 years old. Nobody told us, hey, there's mental health. Hey, this guy may not be cut out for this. Hey, Chief, we probably should take this guy off the convoy. We didn't. I don't even think anybody told Chief, our leader at the time. And basically, we're in a chapel, funny enough, doing mission brief. I'm hazing him. I'm a gunner. He's a gunner. You don't deserve a gun, So we're kind of picking on the guy. Well, he pulls a gun on me, tells me to shut the fuck up. Pulls a 9mm. Doesn't rack it. It's not loaded. I'm not scared. I proceed to tell him, you're dead to me, Again, there's no mental health training in 2005 in Ramadi. So you're dead to me, Maybe a week goes by. We're in another incident. One of the protocols is to count your VIX in front of you, make sure it ain't been infiltrated. The rear of the convoy is dealing with something. We're all kind of on edge. The driver grabs him to say, hey, motherfucker, how many VIX you got? Pulls it, racks it, puts it on fire, puts it in his face. Says, don't ever fucking touch me again. And so we dropped.
This is the same guy.
Yeah, same guy.
So
I didn't tell anybody.
So he's now pulled a weapon on
Twice on his team. I didn't tell anybody. There was other witnesses. We just thought, again, looking back, we'd do a lot of things different. I'm almost 40 now. Didn't tell anybody. Everybody saw it. I thought no big deal. He pulled it on him. Now people know, vehicle commander, we drop him off. We never see him again until his court-martial, where we're all witnesses. And I remember distinctly thinking, had he shot, Restrepo was his name, but had he shot my friend, it would have been my fault, yeah, because I didn't tell anybody. And I didn't realize this till, I'll just say, I got a counselor before I retired, as most people should get counseling. And I'm talking through all this, and she's like, do you ever think everybody is I won't say his name, but do you ever think that you're so hard on people because you want to break so they don't get the chance to shoot your friend? And it was kind of like one of those moments where I'm like, because I'm hard on people. And, I was pushing him. I essentially broke him, but nothing happened, right? He still had access to it. And had he shot my friend, Restrepo was a good friend of mine, it would have been my fault, yeah, because I didn't tell anybody. And so the counselor kind of asked me, she's like, do you ever feel that has maybe implanted in you a calling to break people? So that's probably a whole other conversation, but yeah, it definitely had an impact on how hard I was pushing. And honestly, it probably propelled my career because I pushed so hard.
But the pushing hard, was it because you just wanted to see how far you could push?
Because I didn't want people to break when it counted.
So you kind of found yourself in a drill instructor mode from the very beginning.
Yeah. Drill instructor was very natural to me. It came almost immediately to me. And I think looking back, that might be why, because I took so much pride in training and working hard and working with people because I never wanted anyone to experience that again. One, I wish he would have never broke. I wish he was stronger. I wish he was more resilient. I wish that would have never happened, but it did. What could I do to make sure that doesn't happen again? I can make people stronger.
Yeah, what I want you to do is I want you to break that down. How would you have approached that differently, knowing what you know now and the incident that you described where you pushed him to that point? How do you approach that differently now to put him in the most advantageous position to help the team?
So first, I would say training, because we didn't have time to train. We were doing construction planning to go to Rota, Spain, and it was after Memorial Day. They recalled everybody's leave, and we got like a 30-day notice that we were going to not only deploy to Iraq now, but we were going to do convoy security, something we'd never done before. So we had a little bit of training, but I don't think near enough. So looking back, more training, and then at the time, I get it. They needed us. There probably wasn't a lot of there wasn't a filtering process to make sure they got the right people to do that job. So I would say training, and in the training, there needed to be some kind of vetting process to make sure we took the right people to Iraq and we put the guns in the hands of the right people. So I would say training, vetting, and then I would say my chief was, my leader was just sleep deprived worse than everybody else. He's expected to plan these routes, plan these convoys, be in the talk, be in the briefs. He's expected to get updated intel. So while we're doing weapons watch and sleeping rotations, that man never slept. So I think there was a leadership gap there where kind of the inmates were running the asylum a little. I think that mid-level leadership, there were people senior ranking to us. We were all E3s, E2s. There were people senior to us that didn't step in. So I think empowering your leaders to identify and recognize a problem early could have avoided that second incident.
Yeah, I think it's important that people understand, we do a lot of things really well in the military, but one thing we're really good at in hindsight is being critical of our own mistakes. And so I think it's great that you're sharing a lot of this because it's reality. And
People don't like reality, Tom.
No, they don't. But it's not the norm. We're giving people extremes of situations because, like you said, 98% of the time,
everything's going good.
Everything goes well.
Yep.
And, it's really no different. And I don't want to go too far down this path, but, you were at the state fair when the shooting occurred not too long ago. You were very, very close to it.
I was 100 yards away from where that incident went down, yeah.
And that's, no one, well, I shouldn't say no one, only a couple of people had any kind of training to deal with this stuff. Yeah. And so I just think it's important that we put into perspective the things we're talking about here, these extremes, are really more of a preparation for worst case scenarios than anything else.
And what would you learn? What would your audience learn if we sat here and just patted ourselves on the back?
They wouldn't learn anything.
I could tell you.
They'd go, "Oh, that's cool," or "That's neat."
I could tell you 100 stories where people smiled and laughed and had a good time. But what would that be? Most of my career was fantastic. There were some shitty moments, and there's some things I would do different. I think there's a lot more to learn if I were to just be humble and share the mistakes. But yeah, you're right. Somebody could say, "Oh, that guy. Oh, boot camp." No, boot camp changes people's lives. People came from nothing. People came from bad situations. People came from gang violence. People came from broken homes. And the military offered them an opportunity to join something, and though not perfect, still better than what they had, opportunity. And a lot of people, I came from the middle of Houston, mom, no dad, not the greatest situation. I made the most of it. I live in a very nice, after a 20-year military career, I live in a very nice area. I made a lot of good decisions, and I married a woman that's very good with money. But I'm very fortunate to be here. Hard work, man.
So you're talking about the way people need to understand certain things, and Memorial Day is one of those things that we don't understand very well.
No, they don't.
It's what Carry the Load is all about. You've not been to one of our events yet, but I know I'm going to pull you out there this year. Help people understand from the perspective of somebody who spent 20 years in the Navy, why do Americans need a better understanding of Memorial Day?
So I haven't been to one of your events. I so look forward to it, man. But I got to do the wreath laying at Arlington when I was at my last duty station. And a friend of mine took me out there, and we laid wreaths. And Memorial Day for me was epitomized watching a family, a wife and 3 children with a young daughter, I think it was like daughter, son, daughter, lay a blanket and a picnic on their father's grave and bawl their fucking eyes out, man. And I think in that moment, I knew why. I'm getting mad. I'm getting sad thinking about it. I knew why I never wanted to be thanked for my service on Memorial Day, because I get to go home to my family. I get to tuck my kids in at night. And you wouldn't believe, you go to Arlington for the wreath laying, you will see people come out of the woodworks to honor their family, and you will see so many kids crying. And what a reminder. I mean, Memorial Day got it, I think 1868, right, or whenever it was. Got it, absolutely. Pay homage, pay respect to those who have built and fought to what we have. But I mean, it's right here. People are still dying. People are still dying in service to this country. And so for me, Arlington was like monumental. I mean, to just be reminded of how fortunate I am when, IED goes off and no shrapnel and I get to go home with a concussion, Guy shooting at me can't hit a fucking broadside of a barn. I get to go home, you know? And then to see this little girl, and she was around my daughter's age, and I mean, I'm crying in the middle of Arlington, grown man. This ain't my kid. I don't know this girl, but she reminded me of my daughter, and just thinking that he's not there for her, and what that would mean to me to not be there for my daughter. That's why Memorial Day is so important to me.
I almost feel guilty because I'm smiling as you're telling this story, and for anyone watching this episode, the reason I'm smiling is because what you described was the family basically having a picnic with their father. Now that's not anything to be lauded, but that connectedness with their father in the grave, I mean, that's as close as they're going to get to being with him, and that's all they get. But that's better than nothing at all. Yeah. And so you gave me a really powerful image there. And, you know, Arlington National Cemetery, and we actually have a lot of people don't realize this. Arlington National Cemetery is not part of the National Cemetery Administration. But it's in the same vein. And people need to understand how important it is to go out there and see these headstones. Go out there and talk to the families when they're out there visiting that person who unfortunately is no longer with us, especially those we lost in a combat environment.
There is a very large section for OIF, Operation Iraqi Freedom, Afghanistan. There's a very large section, and it's almost guaranteed somebody's family will be there. And if you go for the wreath laying, I don't remember when it was, I think it's in the fall, but it was a massive event, and there was a lot of that going on, man.
Did you lose any friends?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we were very fortunate. Our unit was very fortunate. I have lost people that I served with, not in combat, but unfortunately to suicide. So I've lost a few people I've served with to suicide. Our combat deployment, we were very fortunate. We did not lose anybody, but yeah, since then, yeah, I have.
You actually bring up a really good thing, and I kind of want to end on this. We do a very poor job in the military allowing ourselves to be victimized. Like you said, you know, some people taking their own lives. You know, the father in the grave with his children and wife having a picnic above ground. Are we victims?
No, no. I mean, nobody's a victim. I mean, in my eyes, nobody's a victim. Life deals. Life's hard. It's not supposed to be easy, and it's never going to be easy. I don't. The military, we are certainly not victims. We have way more benefits, way more opportunities. We could certainly throw stones at the VA system, and there's certainly some opportunity there for growth on their part. But it would be no different if I were to jump on that bandwagon, but then I blame politicians, I blame the swamp. If I were to talk any of that, I can't do both, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm saying, hey, the swamp is the swamp and we need to do our own thing, we need to be ready on our own, it's up to us, it's up to families, it's up to communities. I can't then say, oh yeah, but it's the VA's fault people kill themselves. You know, I don't do that.
Yeah.
It's all or nothing. It's up to me to lead my family. It's up to my family to be a good family, to attract other families to want to support and be a part of my family, my extended network. Like, it's up to me.
In other words, we have to take responsibility.
We do, but I do say that knowing that, especially I retired out of I got out of the military out of Little Creek, which is a SEAL expeditionary, mostly it's where a lot of the East Coast SEALs are. They lose some heroes, man. They lose. So I want to say that cautiously. Like, I'm not saying family's the answer, because I've seen some men that have resumes you could write a movie on, and they take their life. And so I'm not saying I have the answer. I don't blame the VA system solely. I don't know what causes somebody to do that. I wish I did. I know a lot of people wish they did, because man, I've seen some damn war heroes, with beautiful families. take their own life. So it's a tough one.
But I'm glad to hear your perspective. We are not victims. Nobody is a victim, and we have to take responsibility to pull ourselves out of situations. And we're human beings, and unfortunately, some of our guys have the pain is so much that they don't know what else to do. But I agree with you. That does not make us a victim class by any stretch.
God, no. We're very fortunate. We've been given a lot of opportunity. There is still a very pro-military, pro-veteran sentiment you could tap into. There's still amazing organizations that want to help vets. At the end of the day, some people want help and some people don't.
Phil, thanks, man. I've thoroughly enjoyed the time and enjoyed getting to know you and enjoyed getting to know you a little bit more. So I look forward to seeing you on the trail this year. Carry the load.
Thank you very much, Todd. Appreciate it.
Man.
If this resonated with you in the least, please subscribe and like, and please, please, please share it with at least one person. These are the stories that make us uniquely American. These are the stories that preserve the integrity of our nation.